In this video, I want to talk about data stacks. This is just the fancy term or the mainstream term for data infrastructure. What does that look like? I'll show you a simple way to organize it, the 5 elements you should be thinking about, and then how to build upon it. Let's jump in. Hi there, my name is Ruben, and I'm a professional treasure hunter, or a data strategist, or just an expert in data. And I work with companies to help them understand how to turn their data into insights, and then to decisions, and then of course into outcomes. When it comes to data, there's usually some kind of stack, a series of software tools or infrastructure that helps you store and manage it all. Now this stacks, infrastructure can get complex incredibly fast. Even as someone who is in the space, I get confused when I look at some of the stacks. And it's extremely tedious, in my opinion. You're debating tool 1 versus tool 2, and you're looking at all these technical specs. So this needs to be done. There's no denying that. But I want to give you a framework in which to think about it. What's the strategy behind the infrastructure to make sure you're covering all your bases and you're not missing critical things? So in my opinion, there's 5 elements that make up any data infrastructure out there. No matter how complex, how advanced, or how simple, these 5 elements are present in some shape or form. And if you get all the 5 elements right, then you have a pretty good infrastructure, and one in which you could probably grow with it and scale it. One is collection. How do you track data? How do you collect it into your systems? This may happen at the client level, websites, apps. It may happen from backend systems, offline levels. Maybe people are actually submitting some kind of offline data source who gets converted into a digital format. Doesn't matter. Collection, number 1. Number 2 is storage. Once you collect it, where do you store it? This is where you might think about data warehouses, data lakes, but you can of course store data anywhere. It could be as simple as a Google Sheet. You could technically qualify as storage. So once you collect it, where do you store it? Number 3 is cleaning. It's likely that data will need to be transformed, cleaned up. The more structured it is, the less cleaning you have to do, and the more unstructured it is, the more cleaning that is required. How do you clean the data? How do you make sure it plays well with any other data sources you have? Number 4 is accessibility. Once you have data, how do people access it? How do they go through it? This is where you'll see things like BI tools. Tableau, Domo, Klipfolio, Data Studio. You also see self-service tools, Mode, Chartio, Mixpanel, Amplitude. I can't keep track of all these tools. But this is basically how people access the data. It may be done through a nice interface. It may be done through something very specific like a dashboard. It may be just as simple as a command line and SQL. Just how do you give access to people? And as you can imagine, you have to give access in multiple ways. And the 5th one is monitoring. So once you have this infrastructure, how do you monitor it? How do you make sure you're not dropping data? How do you make sure you're not making mistakes in the collection or the storage or the cleaning? How do you make sure that people are actually able to access the data they need on a regular basis? So the monitoring has a technical component, maybe the most obvious one, are things flowing as expected, but there's also a psychological component, which is, are people actually getting value out of it? There's no point in having this amazing infrastructure that no one can use. It's just like buying a really fast car, but no one can drive. And you just sort of look at it and you're like, that's a nice car. It looks amazing, but no one can do it. No one can drive it. So infrastructure and the accessibility portion is really key. I think, the other elements, the collection, the storage, the cleaning, even the monitoring to an extent, can be very technical, very straightforward, but the accessibility, that's I think where the real magic happens. And a lot of the work I do is typically where I come in. They don't need technical help. They're fantastic at technical help. They understand everything from from here to the moon, but how to get it into the hands of people and getting people to use the data to make decisions, that's trickier. So rapid choices matter. You really want to move along here. You can find 3, 4, 5 options at each stage. You can debate them until the end of time. Be able to choose top 2, 3, compare them. There's something I call the assumption scoring. I'll show the image here, and it just simply shows how to compare 2 tools based on your criteria. You score it, and you find the best fit for you. Not the perfect tool, but the best fit. So really, in this infrastructure, as you build it, you want to make the best choices for now. You're thinking about the future, of course. You're not trying to completely lock yourself into one approach, but doing this rapidly is important. I really don't think you need to spend 12 months debating data infrastructure. I think this is a question of weeks. So you go through the process, you find the vendors, you narrow them down, you find your best fit, and you make a choice. That's it. You move on. You move on with your life. There's so many other things to do than choosing vendors. Use the 5 elements that I provided here: collection, storage, cleaning, accessibility, and monitoring to define and build your data infrastructure or data stack. I think that's actually what I'm using here. It's the same thing, interchangeable terms. And that's all I have for today. Make sure to subscribe, like the video, turn on notifications, anything else you have to do YouTube-wise. You probably know it better than I do. I post videos on a weekly basis, breakdowns, case studies, ideas, strategies. You'll get those faster or you'll be notified if you subscribe. In the description, you'll find 2 links. One is the Growth Needle. This is my weekly newsletter, which has similar ideas but in text, and there's some things that I only post in the newsletter. So look out for that. And there's also a link for Twitter. I just started using Twitter, so I'm quite new, but it's still a great place to follow me, engage, post questions, comments, whatever else you might want to do. So finally, in the comments below, just tell me what are some of the maybe important elements in data infrastructure, in your opinion. Maybe, is there any elements in the 5 that I mentioned that you think are more important? Any elements where you might run into issues? Post them in the comments. I'd love to hear that. Talk soon.